Greetings, everyone. Thank you for having me on your podcast again. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Nkozia. I am the executive director of the Moors Association, and what we represent is focusing on sustainable innovation, community building, and education development for African communities around the world. Right now, we've focused and targeted Washington, DC, that urban community, alongside with Abietse and Ghana. And we're looking to expand elsewhere. And that's a little bit about me.
All right. So the conversation that we have today actually have to do with history and also law. If you could start with the presentation of the, I think it's the research that you have done. Yeah.
For sure. Before I get started as to the why, I wanted to make a statement of an ancient Kemetic jurist that said this quote to his audience, to his people, to his members of his community. He said, "If the teachers allow themselves to be led toward evil principles, verily the people who understand them not will speak accordingly, and that being said to those who are docile, they will act accordingly. Then all the world considers them as masters, and they inspire confidence in the public. But their glory endures not so long as would please them. Take not away a word from the ancient teaching, and add not one thing in place of another. Beware of uncovering the rebellious ideas which arise in you, but teach according to the words of the wise. Attend if you wish to dwell in the mouth of those who shall attend to your words. When you have entered upon the office of master, that your words may be upon our lips, and that there may be a chair from which to deliver your arguments." This is coming from Ptah Hotep in 2200 BCE. So I'm starting off with a jurist from Africa who had these types of principles in their legal system for the public. It's really interesting because in this quote, he's discussing the idea of not taking away from ancient texts. And we're living in the modern day, contemporary times, where there has been a distortion and whitewashing of ancient texts all the time. Like, it's very pervasive, right? So it's a very intriguing quote to listen to from someone who's so ancient from the past, because all of that relates to today. A lot of times people don't want to think about history, but it always comes full circle.
All right. Thank you so much for that. That's really very interesting. All right. The first thing I'm going to ask you now is, of course, going to the basis, which is the concept itself of law. From your understanding, from your research, what did you found as what could actually be the Africa concept of law?
Yeah, I feel like, first of all, law was different in different places, but something I found a commonality in when researching legal systems or the concept of law in different African groups was that, first of all, the people were the law, right? Like they not only embodied the law, but they knew the law. They knew their rights at a point in time. Like, this would be when Africa was more educated by African principles and African interests, but that's really what the legal system was, as far as the community creating it together and holding each other accountable. It's just when things were more communal, right? So now currently we're not in those times anymore, but that's really what the law was. So people knew what they weren't supposed to do, what they could do, and if they did do something wrong, they knew how to go about it. You know, sometimes they would have to be in front of a chief or a queen mother and have the whole public watch, or different witnesses watch, and they would speak their case and do the punishment, whatever the case may be. But it was more so that people understood what was right and what was wrong in that community.
All right. Now, this is going to become because it's beginning to get even more interesting now, in that when we look at Africa, of course, by Africa, I'm looking at what the world know of Africa, which is the writings and the description of Africa from other people, which is what many people actually know of Africa. Even some Africa do reference Africa from out of African documentation of what Europeans have actually said of Africa. So in this sense, they actually said that Africa have no history. And when we are not talking of law, because for law to exist, there has to be a kind of an organized system. If you get what I'm trying to point out there, people usually say that Africa don't have history. What would be your reaction? Because at least since we are dealing with history and also law, I'm trying to understand just your reaction as an African to that.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, someone making that statement and that assertion, and keep in mind, these were actually quote unquote Caucasian or white intellectuals, quote unquote, right? Or scholars, quote unquote, that used to say this, right? I would say that it shows the delusions that we live by, or we live by someone else's imagination, right? We live by this Western white culture imagination that harms everybody that's involved in it. It harms people that are Black, blue, green, yellow, and white. It harms everybody, right? Because what you're doing is that you're changing education, you're changing knowledge, you're changing truths into lies, right? And it's being accepted because people don't know any better. But now things are starting to come out and people are a little bit more educated. But this is what's happened, like essentially, like especially when it comes to different fields like Egyptology, like that stuff was created in order to distort history and to whitewash it, or even the field of anthropology, right? That was meant to go into indigenous communities around the world and find out what they knew, find out what their history was, and then destroy it or take it as their own or use it as a mechanism to control them, right? So these things has happened. But something that's really interesting is it's a book by Chancellor Williams that says the destruction of a Black civilization. And he actually goes over the political theories and principles of ancient African constitutional law. And he recognizes that there was a lot of commonalities within constitutional law across Africa. Like there was some principles that a lot of people would just live by, right? And in these communities, members had the understanding of what their rights are. And I just wanted to list off a few of those, right? So the first one is the people are the first and final source of all power. That's a powerful one. The rights of the community of people are and of rights ought to be superior to those of any individual, including presidents, district attorneys, judges, chiefs, kings, etc. The will of the people is the supreme law. Chiefs and kings are under the law, not above it, right? Because there was a belief once that kings and queens, this royalty concept that we have today, was meant to only serve the people, right? Like government systems were only meant to serve the people, and so were kings and queens. So once they weren't serving the people, they were overthrown. They were even killed sometimes, right? The third one is the government officials of all governments are meant to be leaders for the people, not rulers. They are meant to execute the will of the people. The fourth one is the government and the people are meant to be one and the same. Another one is the right to a home. Like these are ancient customary laws that have always existed, but has left our thought process as African people, like not only in the land of Africa because of colonization, but even around the world. Like we're right here struggling for the rights to a home, right? Or for shelter, for water, for food, for the basic necessities. And there was a legal system that predated all of that, all of what exists today, that says that no, this is the basic need, this is basic, like everyone should be able to have this, right? I think when talking about Mansa Musa and his quote unquote servants, they always had wealth on them. Like they had gold. They weren't, servants, slaves, as in they were just poor, broken down. Like, no, that was during a time where people weren't greedy, you know what I mean? So there was enough to share and go around, and people could still thrive, essentially.
In which period can we pin a time frame to what you are referring to there of this legal system, this constitution, and this commonality that a lot of people live by, like you cited it in the book? Do we have maybe like a kind of a time frame that we are referencing here?
Yeah, this is starting before, like, all the way, like I said, 2200 BCE. And that's just where my research went previously. It could go even further than that because there were civilizations that existed beyond that. But that's where I had started my research from, which is 2200 before Christ era.